Welcome everybody. Let's go ahead and I will introduce us. Hi, welcome to this afternoon's presentation of talking about the new AASL standards. I am Paige Bradenkamp. I'm School Library Consultant at Wyoming State Library, and I am going to be the facilitator today. We are fortunate to have our AASL affiliate for Wyoming, Jennison Lucas. She is an elementary school librarian in Park County School District number 1. And I think she manages 5 school libraries. 4, okay. So I'll turn it over to Jennison to tell you about herself and about the new AASL standards.
Excellent. Well, Paige gave me a pretty good introduction, so that's probably what you need to know about me. I have done elementary library since 2002 when I started working in North Carolina, though my career seems to have been taken off in the last few years, and I'm starting to feel a lot more confident in myself. So hopefully I will be able to answer some questions and share a little bit about our standards as we kind of go through this kind of beginner's presentation. So to start with, there are 3 sets of standards competencies for the learner, the school librarian, and the school library. And on this slide, you can kind of see which gear goes with which picture. I actually grabbed that picture from the app, which we will talk about in a little bit. Some terminology that you're going to need to know for this particular presentation, or for understanding the standards at all, are learners, and this word has been purposefully chosen instead of the term students to encompass all learners. So the learners is what they've decided to replace the term students with, so that we're encompassing everybody as a learner and talking about our principals as the lead learners, our teachers as learners, our students as well. The common beliefs are those qualities of well-prepared learners, effective school libraries, and dynamic school librarians, and we're going to take a look at those in a moment. The shared foundations are the highest level of standards, and they describe core educational concepts of inquire, include, collaborate, curate, explore, and engage. And in fact, I just had a meeting with my superintendent who commented on those being a basic foundation of our entire educational program. So I thought that was exciting. Underneath those shared foundations are our key commitments. There are kind of our second level, but they're a descriptive statement explaining what exactly it is that those foundations mean. And then the domains are under each of those shared foundations are think, create, share, and grow. And in some ways they're like a depth of knowledge idea that we kind of move toward that growth in general. And then the last one is the competencies. Let's see if I can get my screen to advance and add competencies. There we go. Competencies, these are the general statements of the specific, what we would then call the standards underneath each of those. There are 2 words that have been purposefully chosen not to include in the terminology. One of them is that we are no longer using the word program to refer to our school libraries, because we want them to be not considered as a program like the math program or a specific piece, because it's more encompassing. Our work is more encompassing. So instead of programs, they've come back to just school libraries, and then under that idea of the services and resources that we provide. And the other word that has been left out is the word guidelines. If you remember that we used to have standard or guidelines for school librarians, and they are now standards. It's not a guideline, and it's that little bit more forceful language, I guess, which is nice because it feels confident, and I like that. So these are our 6 common beliefs as included in our standards documents. The school library is a unique and essential part of a learning community. Qualified school librarians lead effective school libraries. Learners should be prepared for college, career, and life. Reading is the core of personal and academic competency. Intellectual freedom is every learner's right. and information technologies must be appropriately integrated and equitably available. And we did some discussion at the pre-conference that I attended about these common beliefs and figuring out kind of how we can anchor ourselves to them a little bit better than maybe some of us have in the past. Okay. Are we good to move on to here with, or do we have questions yet?
I think we're good to move on.
Okay. So then a little bit of history. This is a timeline of the library standards. I pulled this off of the Standards Web Portal, but it was really interesting to read the section in the big standards book about our standards, and that they really do go back to the 1920s. And when it was also interesting to me to see that the NEA was part of those standards back then. And then, so across the top, you can see where the different sets of standards have kind of pulled in. And in several cases, there were library programs and then media programs, district and school, things happening at the same time. And across the bottom of this, you can see the evolution of what we call ourselves and our programs, and that idea of school library media center to the school library media program to school library media specialists, and then back to school libraries. And I thought this was quite an interesting thing to have read, and which also turned out to be helpful to me today when I had got to explain to someone that we've always had standards. It's not new and they never had them before. It's new as in we've revised them.
That is,
so
even
the process,
for librarians that might, even for some librarians, that might be a surprise that that our standards go back all the way to 1920 or 1917. That's
you know, at the opening session, at our opening session at AASL, they did a big thing and had people stand up for which group, like which standards were enforced when they started their career. And it was interesting to see where we had people starting to stand up and realizing that I started in 2002 and we were still in this information power age. And then I got to see the 21st century learners and now the national school library standards. It's kind of an interesting experiment. So the process to get to these new standards. And this was kind of an exciting thing for me to watch. I feel like I've been watching these standards develop for the 3 years that they've been working on them as well. So it started with an editorial board, and our editorial board was appointed, but there was an application process. So you had to apply if you wanted to be on it, and then you were interviewed, and then they were chosen from the interviews. There were 7 people chosen for the editorial board. And then they worked closely with a company called KRC Research, who helped facilitate meetings and keep everything on track. And the people from that group were great about being able to show and model that strategic research, because these are all research-based standards. And then about 6 months after the editorial board started, the implementation task force started their work. This task force was also a application appointee, so you had to apply for it, and then they had interviews, and then were chosen from that. I did apply for both of those and was interviewed for the implementation task force, but they didn't choose me as part of that, but that's okay. They had a lot of work to do. I'm kind of glad that I wasn't actually chosen for that, as cool as I think it would be. And then implementation task force and the editorial board worked really closely together for figuring out exactly what are those standards going to be, and then how are we going to roll them out. And so they are the ones who are ultimately responsible for all of the amazing resources that we're going to look at in a moment, and some of you may have already started to explore. Then we got input by stakeholders. And this happened in 3 different ways. We had a survey that went out to everybody in AASL, and it ran from August 25th to September 28th in 2015. They got a little over 1,100 respondents, almost 1,200 respondents. Some of you may have also responded to that. I'm pretty sure I did. Then the national focus groups happened at the AASL conference in Ohio, and they had 6 groups with 40 participants, and that was something I did get to participate in, which was really neat to sit down with another 8 people and just talk about what we liked about our old standards, what we would like to see in the new standards, how we would like to change up some of the ways it was presented and things like that. And they really did use a lot of our input. So I'm not quite sure what I'm cleared to say about that process yet, but it was pretty cool. And then they had affiliate focus groups. There were 14 groups at 10 different state conferences to cover about 110 participants. And those focus groups went to conferences that were in the spring, the year that they were doing them. And I want to say the spring of 2016 would probably be the right timeline. And so the conferences ran from February to May that they participated in those at. So they got a lot of input from a lot of people along the way. They also looked at the previous standards for library. They also looked at other disciplines standards like social studies standards, Common Core standards, science standards, so that they could be using some of the same terminology as the other standards, so that when we talk about our standards with other people, we're using similar language already, which I thought was awesome. Yeah.
So these standards, they are very well researched, and they are designed to be integrated into the core curriculum at the school, at your school level. Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
And there are lots of different entry points to get to them because it's really cyclical, as you know, as we know that the research and learning is. Okay, so here are our shared foundations and key commitments. Dun, dun, dun. We have Inquire, which is really about building new knowledge. This is nothing new to us. Inquiring, thinking critically, identifying problems, and developing strategies for problem solving. That is a big part of what library has always been about. Including is about demonstrating that understanding and commitment of inclusiveness, respecting diversity, bringing in multiple perspectives, making sure that you don't just take, you know, the first idea that comes along, that you see what the other side of the story might be along the way. Collaborating, which is, of course, working effectively with others. Curating, which I think is great that we've included, because curating is a lot like, to me, has been always a library specific thing. And when I was growing up, maybe it shouldn't be we, but when I was growing up, that was done by the librarian or by the teacher, and the resources were provided for us, and we knew that they were evaluated well. Mm-hmm. But now it's make meaning for oneself by collecting, organizing, sharing resources and personal relevance, and it's more about making my own meaning and collecting my own resources, figuring out what all is out there that is relevant to what we're doing now. And I love that they used the funnel as an image for that, because we do have an overwhelming amount of information that we have to drill down into.
So Jennison, sorry, just real quick, that made me think though, of all of the information resources that are out there, and as educators, we don't see all of them, and sometimes kids have information sources that, you know, we would not have even thought of. So I think that's a really great thing. So
exploring is the one we're going to actually look at that one a little bit more in depth, because it's a kind of my favorites, because the key commitment is to discover and innovate in a growth mindset developed through experience and reflection. Just having that term growth mindset in our standards is a great way to link into our principals, our teachers, because they're trying to figure out, how do we teach a growth mindset? And now we've got standards that show how to teach a growth mindset, and that's a goal for us to get in with our team. And then to engage is demonstrate safe, legal, and ethical creating and sharing of knowledge products independently while engaging a community of practice in an interconnected world. So engage we immediately think about just being engaged with what you're doing, but that's where they've decided to put that engaging ethically with material. So we're not just going and getting it and playing it, we're using it responsibly, we're evaluating it, we are making sure that we cite things properly, that we get the permissions that we need, because that is stuff that is changing a lot in the world that we live in. Those are our shared foundations and key commitments. And I'm going to pop that up. There we go. That might make my life easier. Domains are those depth of knowledge sorts of things, and they are to think, create, share, grow. And they referred to these in our book as the KSA, knowledge, skills, and attitude. So thinking is a cognitive approach to things, creating is sharing is affective, and growth is the developmental. But in my brain, you kind of have to think about it, then create it, then share it with somebody, and that's kind of how you're growing by doing that whole process. And like I said before, it is also, here's an image to kind of show how that create, share, and grow are all in the center circle, where the outer circle goes through all of our commitments and foundations, and that they all really work together in a great way.
Yeah, I like that there's the infographic that goes with it. It makes it really easy to visualize everything that you're trying to do, but it's a circle. Like you said, it's cyclical, so it's here.
And these are not standards you teach in order, because you're going to be doing a lot of them at the same time, which is how we learn. Okay, so in the actual great big book, which is what you have in order to be able to see this particular layout, you can see that the first column is the learner domains and competencies, the middle column is the school librarian domains and competencies, and the last column is the school library domains and alignments. And I love that the school librarian is in the middle. They did so much work thinking about how to make this work, because the school librarian domains and competencies are what we have to know and be able to do as school librarians in order to help facilitate the learner's mastery. But we are also in charge of the school library. So the school library list is what services and resources and availabilities we should have in both physical and virtual spaces for our learners. But we're kind of in charge of that too. So we kind of go to both sides of this as we look at. Yeah. So here's an example of what it looks like. And I just typed this out, so I'm hoping I don't have any typos on here, instead of be a page from the book, because it was just going to be too hard to read. But I called it a horizontal progression, but I'm not really sure that that's true. So for the domain Explore, which has the front of it as the fifth domain, or the fifth shared foundation, and then its key commitment is that discover and innovate a growth mindset. And then under the domain of think, which is labeled with an A, we have the learner competencies, where learners develop and satisfy personal curiosity by, number 1, reading widely and deeply in multiple formats, and write and create for a variety of purposes. Now, I pointed out the VA1 because that's how you should actually refer to the standards if you are going back and talking about them. It would be standard 5A1 in the Roman numeral letter and then number. And then if you go across the page to the school librarians foster learner personal curiosity by encouraging learners to read widely and deeply in multiple formats and write and create for a variety of purposes. So it ties directly to what the learner has to learn. And then going on to the school library supports learners' personal curiosity by providing resources and strategies for inquiry-based processes and fostering opportunities. So it's not necessarily one, because there's only two in the school library one in here, but they all do go together, and it's very easy to see in this layout how they all go together. So I'm going to pause and see if we need to ask any questions or comments.
Yeah, if you have any questions, type them into the chat box or the question box, and we can answer as we go through this presentation. If you're still just digesting and trying to process all of this information, that's fine too, because it is a lot. This is very complex. Very
Absolutely.
robust.
I'm processing it. Which is one of the reasons I wanted to type it out, to be honest with everyone. So then this is actually what they've been calling the centerfold of the pamphlet, is the standards framework for learners in one nice 11 by 17 kind of page that everything is right there for the learners. This is available as a PDF online that you can download it for free, and I will show you how to get to that. And you can buy them as pamphlets that are on a little bit tougher paper. I think there's 10 in a package for $16 or $17 at the ALA store. And I purchased a package of those and have handed this little package out to all of my principals, my superintendent, my associate superintendent in charge of instruction, and so that they have a nice one-page, oh, hey, I can see your standards. And I wanted to give it to them on a nice paper, so I bought them because I think it's a nice way to advocate that I think that they are important. And then this is what the same standard would look like, that vertical going through the domains of think, create, share, and grow. So the learners in thinking will read widely and deeply, reflect and question, and engage in an inquiry-based process. And then for create, they're going to problem solve, persist. So here's where we get some of that those soft skills of persistence and sticking with it and that kind of stuff right in our standards. And then into share, expressing curiosity about a topic, co-constructing innovative means of investigation. I love that one. Collaboratively identifying innovative solutions. And then growing, learn, develop through experience and reflection by iteratively responding to challenges, recognizing capabilities, open-mindedly accepting feedback. Some of you may recognize some of the standards from the last group because they haven't changed a lot, but they're definitely in an easier way to take a look at them. And I did this color coding on here to match the way that they have color coded these standards in the book. So I will hold my actual book up in front of my camera, hoping that you guys can see that.
We can.
So that you can see I was trying to do the same kind of, so that it looked similar, but typed so that it was a little bit easier to go through. Okay. So moving on to, this is all great, but how do I get my hands on those standards? There are 3 ways that you can access the standards. Buy the standards book, which is what I was just showing you. These are, and we'll come back and talk a little bit more about those in a sec. There is an app available, and the Standards Web Portal is the other place we can go. And the Web Portal has so much stuff on it, it's amazing. So in the standards document, it's, for one thing, kind of expensive. It's $99 for AASL members through the ALA store. It's $199 for non-AASL members. So my dues definitely paid for themselves this year. But it's, I think, worth every penny. It contains multiple entry points for the standards, so it includes all 3 competency sets, the learner, the school librarian, and the library. And there are several different ways for looking at it, so that if looking at all of them at once doesn't work for you, there are some single page kind of things as well. Oops, I went too fast. There are easy to read charts showing the horizontal and vertical alignments. That was one of the things I just showed. There are chapters for each shared foundation, including in-depth summaries and best practices charts. So that was really nice. There were, let's see if I can pull one of those up in my book. So this was the chapter on engage, and right at the end there is a best practices page kind of list, checklist.
So that kind of shows ways that you can implement these standards in your lessons, in your teaching?
Yes. So like the first one that I just showed up there was determine for elementary learners' understanding of acceptable and unacceptable behavior in scenarios related to ethical information use.
Nice.
So they kind of give not necessarily specific lessons, but this is what this would look like in a best practice situation.
Nice.
So that's definitely a nice thing to have. There are chapters in this book on assessment, both of the learners and the libraries. There's a really nice checklist of what does your library have available and provide so that you can kind of checklist through and see what you might be missing. There's information about writing SMART goals, since a lot of us are needing to do that now as part. And at the meetings, at several of the different sessions that I attended at AASL, there was discussion about, well, I don't really understand how to write a SMART goal. And how does that look for library? Because we don't have the same kind of ways to measure growth. We're not necessarily going to find our growth on the end of grade assessment or whatever test that might be, but we have other ways of doing it. They have some information about that. And there's a whole slew of appendices that include the implementation plan and a whole bunch of AASL position statements that go right along with everything in here. So it's a really nice volume, everything that you need to know to be a librarian. With a very nice index. It's over 300 pages long. I have not read it all yet, just in case you were all wondering. Not there yet.
But that is something that, in case, not everybody in a district is an AASL member, that's something that perhaps a district could invest in, and then it can be shared. Or, okay.
Absolutely.
Nice.
I mean, it's nice to have my own copies, but
yeah, so you can write
there's
in it.
Definitely some benefits to sharing, if that's at all possible in your district.
But late night reading, I mean, you definitely want your own copy.
Absolutely, because I always, sleep with my highlighter. Okay, and then the next place that you can go is the Standards App. If you're feeling like $200 is a little bit steep for you to get a copy of all those, this is only $12.99. You can get it at the Apple App Store or Google Play. So that was pretty nice to figure out. It contains all three of the standards frameworks. The image on the first slide after our names up there was actually the front cover of this app. This picture I grabbed from the advertisement for downloading the app. You can easily flip between the three frameworks. So once you have one open, if you're looking at, so the picture that's showing on the screen is the learner framework, and if you tap where that little learner head is, it will ask you if you wanted to switch to library or librarian, and kind of go through them that way. So you can flip back and forth. You can create a profile so that you can take notes and mark it up. I have not practiced with that yet, but I did note that it was possible to sign in and have your own way to keep information. There are some spots in there with notes about how to read the standard and how to understand like where it came from. There's not nearly as comprehensive as the print book, but at least they have some in there. And you can filter your search results, which was pretty cool. And then link to informational sources. So there's actually a link in the app to go to the Standards Web Portal. So if there are some other things you want, other resources, you can flip right to it from the app. And I tried it, it works. So these are a couple of screenshots. This is the first one where you can see the three competencies. This is what looking at collaborate for the learner, collaborate, think. It's a kind of a screenshot from there, and you can see there's a little spot for notes at the bottom, and you can flip through the domains right in the list underneath the key commitment statement. And then this was the filter screen, so you could say, hey, I only want to look at the school library ones, and I specifically want to know to collaborate and a domain, and just filter it down and just pick what you wanted to look at. So it has some pretty nice features, and it was pretty slick.
And I played with it this weekend. I really like how easy it is to flip between the frameworks. I was really impressed with that. I haven't tried everything yet, but that was really handy.
And I like the simple layout of it without a whole lot of extra stuff around it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So you can, oh, those are those standards. That's all I need to see. Okay, and then the last one is the web portal, and we're going to actually go live and take a look at that. Hopefully we still have time for that.
We do. We have 21 minutes.
Oh, good. So our web portal is at standards.aasl.org. I wanted to make sure to actually write that out so that those of you who are trying to take notes or whatever can copy it real quick. And it's a little bit different than just going to AASL.org. This they set up specifically for the standards, and it's changing like every day. They're adding new things to it. They're recommending to us that we check once a week to see if there's anything that's new. This portal went live during the pre-conference that I was attending, and so I went to look to see if I could find the online standards, and I couldn't, and a half an hour later I could. So we really watched it get loaded, which was pretty cool. There's lots of materials for how to share your standards, and we're going to take a look at some of those, but there are some single sheet papers to hand out to your administrators, to your teachers, to your parents that explain what our standards are and how they matter to them. So it's what teachers need to know about our standards, what administrators need to know about our standards, what you need to know about your library standards for your child. So some really nice things. There's also some materials for librarians that we'll take a look at. There's definitely some materials for implementing standards, like how do I start to implement them? How do I get, or how do I deal with overload of standards? Because as great librarians that I know we all are, we don't just work with our standards. We also know the ISTE standards and the Common Core standards and our state social studies standards and science standards and whichever is the 3 C's or whatever. So we know all of those standards. And sometimes it can get a little overwhelming. And so they have some resources to kind of assist with that as well. There are also some videos, and these are really great for sharing with stakeholders if you have the time to share them, because they are student videos with the students saying, this is what my library does for me. This is why my library is where I learn to collaborate or learn to inquire. And the students are very articulate, and it's really kind of cute to watch. And they include elementary school kids and high school kids. So it's not just one level or another. They really do stretch them across all of them. Like I said, resources galore. It's almost overwhelming. I haven't looked at everything yet, but I've tried to pick a few things out. So I think this is the spot. Let me, yeah, and then we were up at questions. So This is where we'll go live to the standards portal.
Well, I have a quick question from Laura. Do you know if this is available as an ebook?
I do not. I will be glad to send that suggestion to AASL.
Yeah, and if it isn't,
it would be nice.
Yeah, if it isn't now, perhaps in the future it will be. I know that the Wyoming State Library has purchased a copy. It's on order right now, so we will have a copy of the book anytime now. So that will be for checkout. So.
And like I said, at least accessing the standards, the app is for that. For all the other amazing resources in the book, it would be kind of nice if they had that available as an ebook that people could download, especially if they made it a little bit cheaper than the actual book. Sometimes that doesn't work that way with ebooks, though. Okay, so if I understand how this all works correctly, you should be seeing my screen that says learner videos, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is just the scroll thing that goes across the top. And if you scroll down on this main page, there are ways that you can enter the portal and enter our standards. So mostly I've gone through the school librarians one. There is a spot for administrators to click in, for parents and guardians, for other educators, so that depending on who you are, you'll have instant access to the resources that might be most beneficial to you, which is really nice. But first I want to show you how to find the standards. So if you go to the About that's up here at the navigation bar, and let me make that drop-down menu come back, you can click in to see the common beliefs, and there is a little bit more information about those common beliefs from there. The standards framework is where you'd want to click in to get to the standards. They have a little bit at the top about them. They have a video explaining the structure. They have some stuff about how to read the standard. And then you get down to the bottom and you actually to the standards. And you can download the learner pamphlet at this first box where it says learner pamphlet. So this one is going to be the PDF that you can actually just print out that will have that awesome, oh, this is a different awesome graphic showing the cyclical cycle of our standards and stuff. And then the common beliefs are in here. This is the first half of that 2-page red centerfold, second half. So that would actually print out on the pages probably. But to get that one sheet page, it's that learner framework. And you can actually print this out as well, which is probably easier for some of us to print, although not as easy for some of us with older eyes to see. And then you can click into buy packs of 10, which I'm almost out of handing out my packs of 10, but I think I might be purchasing another pack just to have it for anyone who asks. Because I actually have had a couple of teachers say, oh, this is great, how can I read your standards? And it would be nice to have that already available to just hand to them, which is pretty cool. And then if you scroll on down a little bit farther, you'll get to the link to learn more about the mobile app. But if you go to Google Play or the App Store, you can just type in AASL Standards and find it without having to read their other info. All right, so now I'm scrolling back up and moving over to resources. Under the resources tab, you'll see materials for this whole long list, videos, and professional development. So under the materials, they've got the things I'm going to highlight here are the 6 action steps infographic, which is a really nice, where do I start? I know about these, I'm on board with them, now what do I do? And they give a little bit of information about how to start thinking about them. So for instance, explore, since we've looked at it before, is take a few minutes to browse all 6 shared foundations infographics, identify one that you feel confident about, what are your strengths in this area, identify one that's a challenge in your practice, how will you pursue growth in this area. So it's not necessarily telling us about how to explore, but it's telling us how to explore the standards. You know, and then inquire, list 3 questions you have. So how are you going to inquire about the standards? So it's really how do we follow the same steps to become learners. It's a very nice infographic and would be great if any of you are going to take this back to your districts to lead a professional development. You can grab that and base your stuff on there. The 1 pages for stakeholders is another one I want to show you. We have the first one is a guide for administrators, so your school library and the learning community. And it's nice because it starts with the library because that's what your administrator is going to care about first, and then the librarian, and then the learners. So saying, okay, the library is the center of your school because this is where we can house all these resources and stuff. And then here's what you want to do to partner with your librarian and let them help lead the way. And then the last one is, and here's what your learners will learn when we're doing this process. The next one down is what the school library standards mean to educators. This I've been handing out to my classroom teachers, and it's talking about what does it mean that you have these standards, and they give our shared foundations. So like under inquire on this one, it says give your questions some student, or give your students some questions to figure out, and then have partner with your librarian to help them find the answers. I mean, it can be that simple, but it shows for each of those domains what to do. And then the last one is about how does the school library support your child. That infographic is focusing on those domains of create, share, and grow, because that's what the parents are going to want kids to be able to do. And so it really focuses on that aspect of it, and then of the child. And then down at the bottom, we have everyone is a learner infographic, which is pretty awesome. As you can tell, I think all of this is pretty awesome. Okay, so this is that infographic using some of those because statements from the library's Transform, which is awesome, because school is a time to think, create, share, and grow. Hey, there's where it fits. So I'm going back up to the resources and materials. We mentioned in here, okay, so here's one pages for school librarians. So refreshing how to get started with them. How do I read them? There's a one-pager on that. Managing standards overload. And then learners interpreting them. These are some videos that with students to take a look at as well. And they really are nice. They're one page only on the front on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. The Shared Foundation infographics are the next one, and these were released before conference, so some of these you've probably seen before. There's an example of Engage right up there at the top, and each of these little circles will get you into the infographic for the others. And like, yeah, as you can see now, they have links in here to Knowledge Quest. Knowledge Quest just right before this webinar had a blog post about Collaborate, I think is the one that they just had. So the implementation committee is still writing blog posts and doing lots of stuff to add that up. I'm going to click down onto the professional development to show what they've got going on there. They have some upcoming events, AASL Standards. They've got the stuff on Knowledge Quest. All of the sessions on the different parts of the standards were filmed at AASL and are in eCollab. If you are an AASL member, eCollab is free. If you are not, you can still sign up for it for $99. So quite honestly, if you joined AASL, it would certainly pay for that, especially if you buy the standards as well. And if you're not familiar with eCollab, it has lots and lots of videos of presenters from conferences or people who have done webinars like this one through AASL proper. Then they have their updates of Knowledge Quest information about how to do that process. And the AASL Standards calendar of events is where they are actually collecting up all of the different webinars, Twitter chats, conference presentations, anything that anybody is doing about our standards. In fact, this webinar is listed on their calendar as well. So it's everything.
Nice.
Even us little folks who are just doing our very first webinars.
You're doing great.
Yeah, thank you. So that kind of gives a really brief, quick, crazy overview of where we can get information to kind of go about getting started on bringing in our new standards. And so we can pull back to questions and stuff, because I'm pretty sure that was the end of our prepared stuff.
Susie Hiley wanted to make known that there is a live binder that they created
Excellent.
for those hashtag not at AASL. And this includes a tab for the standards, the presentations, blog posts, etc. Now, I don't know if everybody can access the chat box. I did post it into the chat box. Otherwise, I will put this link up on the slide deck. I'll put it in with the slides so that it's available. Again, this recording will be available on the Wyoming State Library website. It will be posted to YouTube in the Wyoming State Library page, and the PDF of the slide deck will be linked to both of those. So this will be available. So unfortunately, we don't offer certificates for continuing ed. And let's see. Oh, and thanks, Susie. You're going to add the webinar to the live binder. That's wonderful. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Susie, for sharing that not AASL hashtag. there was a lot of really amazing stuff that got shared with that hashtag, I think.
Good, so that all of us who didn't get to attend can actually go in and see some of it. All right, I need to check that out. So any other questions, please feel free to type them into the chat box or the question box. I know this was a lot of information, and so much so that we couldn't get to every little bit today, but we will be, Jennison, if you feel so inclined, we will definitely be having some more webinars throughout the coming year to focus more in depth on each of the shared foundations, the key commitments, the domains, and integrating it into your teaching in your libraries. So.
Absolutely.
But no, that was really great, Jennison. I'm so glad that you can that you could do this.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad to do it. This was a good way for me to start processing, and because I came back and immediately did 5-minute shout out presentations at staff meetings and just met with my superintendents and that sort of stuff, it kind of is making me keep thinking about them as we work, which is good for me as well. So I hope that what I shared is helpful.
I know it was for me. So there is a question, Jennison. Where can we find related lesson plans that specifically connect to the new standards? Is there a bank of sorts for that on the portal?
I don't have that on the portal yet. There was definitely some discussion about it during the unconference in particular at AASL. They had some discussion about that they kind of want to have a spot that people could post in stuff like that. I don't think it's going to be the same as the previous lesson portal, but they haven't quite gotten that yet. My understanding is that, like I said before, stuff is going up weekly, and some of the staff from AASL, I think Stephanie Book in particular, said that there's a whole lot of information or a whole lot of resources that they want to have available by midwinter. So by ALA midwinter, there's supposed to be a whole bunch more stuff that is available to share out. So we'll keep our fingers crossed. If you create lessons, have them handy to upload.
Nice. And maybe by the next webinar that we have, you'll be able to say, yeah, it's up.
Yeah, for sure. They are working on a crosswalk to the Common Core. I know we had that with the older standards. They said that that is something that's in process. Somebody also asked in one of the sessions I was in about a crosswalk to ISTE standards, and they said they didn't know that that was happening yet, but that doesn't mean it won't. So a lot of work went into all of the stuff that they've already done, and since they started asking for who wants to participate 3 years ago, I think they've done a remarkable job so far.
All right, Jennison, somebody has an online planner that allows her to import standards to go with her lesson plans. Where would she go to get them so they're importable?
That is an excellent question. You may need to create that yourself at this point, doing a cut and paste into a spreadsheet. At this point, I use planbook.com to do my planning, and they have the lesson plan, or they have the standards in there for the old standards. The new standards they don't have in there yet, but there's a spot for us to submit it, but we have to do it through a spreadsheet thing. So I'm guessing that that would be the best plan of action for that. But since it's all on one page, it shouldn't be too hard to import that. I do like planbook.com. I could do a whole nother webinar on that.
Thank you everybody for attending, and to those who are going to watch the recordings, I hope you have benefited a lot from this.
Thank you, for sure.
All right, everybody, have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Paige.
Yeah.
And thank you everybody who came.